What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Revival. My name is JJ, and it's time for another Revival Retrospect. This time, we're talking Phantasy Star IV. I don't have the actual game on Genesis itself, because it's kind of expensive at the moment. I'd love to get it at some point, but you can still find a million other different ways to play it. It's on pretty much, most of the Genesis collections that they've re-released. They've done so many of those. I played the one that's on the PS4. I played it on my PS5. Footage that you'll see is from me playing and recording it on the PS5 itself. So, without any further ado, let's review it. If you've seen my channel for pretty much any given amount of time, you know that I make it no secret that my favorite generation of gaming is right around the Super Nintendo era, during the time of powerhouses like Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana, Super Mario RPG, and of course my favorite game of all time, Final Fantasy VI. I owned a Sega Genesis at the time, but I didn't really know any of the RPGs on the system. I used it mostly for fun action games like Sonic, Road Rash, and Urban Strike. Sure, I had heard the name Phantasy Star, but knew next to nothing about the series nor its history with hardcore RPG fanatics. So years later, when I heard that Phantasy Star IV on Sega Genesis is comparable with some of the aforementioned RPGs on Super Nintendo, I was skeptical to say the least. I became even more so after playing Phantasy Stars 1 through 3 many years later. Don't get me wrong, I appreciate those games and enjoyed my time with them. But to compare it to games like Breath of Fire and Final Fantasy IV, I just found it hard to believe. Still, I kept hearing, just get to the fourth one, it'll blow you away, or just wait till you play part 4, it's easily the best game in the series. So I played through the games from the beginning, waiting for the great improvements along the way. While there were some slight ones leading up to part 3, I really didn't get any sense of having my mind blown, and my skepticism that Phantasy Star IV could live up to the hype was all but solidified. That is, until I actually played it, and was completely blindsided by how quickly all of my doubts and fears dissipated. Phantasy Star IV not only plays just as well as some of those old classic JRPGs on the Super Nintendo, but is also still a wonderful experience that I felt held up even over 25 years after its initial North American release. The story of Phantasy Star IV takes place chronologically in between the events of Phantasy Star II and III, with 1,000 years separating the games on both sides. You play as a hunter named Chaz, who learns the truth about his dying planet and works to find a way to stop the worst from happening. Along the way, you'll meet a whole host of characters, with your party changing with new members constantly coming and going. You don't have to have played any of the other 3 games in order to follow along the plot, but I'm really glad that I did. There are tons of fun little references to the previous games, and it was really cool to see these characters reference the other adventures that I'd been on, and how their world had been impacted by those events. Honestly, the setting in Phantasy Star is what first enticed me to want to give it a shot. I love the idea of a futuristic spacefaring setting, combined with swords, guns, and magic. I actually consider that a pro for the whole series, and not just Phantasy Star IV, as they do a fantastic job blending everything together. The gameplay is that of a standard turn-based RPG of the time. You wander around a world map, several actually, with towns and dungeons to explore, meeting characters and fighting monsters. Combat works in a similar way to the previous Phantasy Star games, where you go into a Dragon Quest style battle screen, choosing menu commands and telling your characters which actions to take each turn. It even features a shortcut system where you can save macros of your favorite commands and then execute them with a single action instead of having to input them for each individual character. Something I'd not seen before in any RPG from that time period that I'd played. Admittedly, I didn't mess around with the macro system much, but I still thought it was cool that it was there. My main gripe with the gameplay, and it's honestly more of a gripe with the series as a whole, is like the abilities and spells that are in there. It's really hard to tell what everything is without having some sort of a guide handy, and it's just really, really tough to know what it is you're going to be using outside of just going into battle and using them. The names are either really generic, like Crosscut, or completely obscure, like Saner. Thankfully, at least in this game, they allow you to see what items do by giving you a look command. I only wish they had done the same thing with the abilities themselves, but you do get used to it after a while when you get comfortable and learn what works and what doesn't, so it's definitely a minor thing. Overall though, the gameplay is easily the smoothest out of the entire series, making quality of life improvements while keeping the spirit of its predecessors. The visuals are a big reason Phantasy Star IV stands out as being exceptional. Bright, colorful anime-style artwork bleeds from the game, and not just in the outstanding cutscenes that feel like nothing else from the time period. The character designs, world map, ships, and monsters all boast distinct personalities, and I found myself smiling while playing just because the game is so aesthetically pleasing. Combat animations are flashy without being over the top, and you'll actually get genuinely excited just from watching your ship flying from planet to space station to planet. The visuals are easily the best part of the game, and the biggest reason it still holds up so well today. However, probably the biggest thing holding Phantasy Star IV back from actually being up there with the likes of Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI is the music. I'm not going to blame the Sega Genesis sound chip, because I frankly think the way the games sound can be a matter of personal preference. Also, I'm not saying the music is bad by any means. Quite the contrary, it has some absolutely wonderful tracks. The problem is that there really aren't that many of them. When grinding for levels or money, I had to turn off the sound because the battle music got annoying so fast, and the way the synth is used in some of the other songs was just a big turn off for me. That being said, when the music is good, it's fantastic. The main theme of the game is so well done and pretty much encapsulates the entire adventure in song form beautifully. You won't hear me say that this is a bad soundtrack in the slightest. I just wouldn't personally put it up with some of the other RPGs of the time simply because I didn't find it consistently pleasing to listen to. The sound itself of the game, however, is perfect for it. The robotic noises and combat explosions fit right in with the futuristic setting, and it just felt natural to hear. Phantasy Star IV's sound design is definitely on point. So there you have it. That's my review of Phantasy Star IV. Man, I have been wanting to play this for so long. And that's like even going back before I even started the series in the beginning. It's because I had heard so long ago that this game, you know, is up there with what I consider to be the pinnacle of RPGs, at least in my life. And that's, you know, Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana. I mentioned those. Does it hold up to those? Yeah, honestly, I think it's damn good. I had a really, really great time with it. I was pleasantly surprised. Going into it, I was, like I said, skeptical. Just because I played 1, 2, and 3, because I wanted to have the full experience. I wanted to see that progression in mechanics and, you know, the overall arcing story and everything like that. But after playing, you know, 1, 2, and 3, I was like, there's no way that it's going to be as good. I again, didn't dislike those games, but it's just... It was really hard for me to really be like, there's just, you know, to just take everything without actually playing it myself. And I'm so glad that I did. Because this game still beautifully holds up with the artwork and everything, and I just really, really enjoyed my time with it. Definitely recommend going out and giving it a shot. If you're a fan of classic RPGs, especially, like I said, the Super Nintendo, that kind of stuff, I cannot recommend this game enough, and it's so accessible right now. Pretty much, like I said earlier in the video, as far as I know, most of the Genesis collections that have come out on so many different consoles throughout the years have it on there. And they even have usually like 2 and 3 or 1, 2, and 3 or some iteration of not just 4, but 4 is almost always there if I remember correctly. So I'm I really, really hope that people go out and give it a shot. And you know what, I will say I have not seen as much as I would expect the kind of like disagreements where people are all like Super Nintendo, no Sega Genesis and stuff, because a lot of retro gamers are like that because that's how it was back in the day. We were all fighting back and forth on that stuff. And I honestly, like, I thought about it and I was like, you know what, I think the reason you don't hear a lot of people saying that about Phantasy Star IV is because a lot of those people have played it, and even if you're a Super Nintendo fan, like me, you have that respect, and you're just like, it's a good one, I'll give it to you, you know? Because it really is. It's a great experience. I enjoyed the hell out of it. Like I said, my main issue was just the spells and abilities, but it's such a minor gripe. And some of them do appear throughout the series, so I knew what a lot of them did just from playing the previous games. Do you have to play those games? No, not at all. But I appreciated it a lot more because I did. You know, and I've talked about, you know, why I play games from release order typically, just because I like seeing that progression of how the development has gone. But I really like, if you're a fan of retro RPGs, I cannot recommend this game enough. So definitely give it a shot on one of the many available platforms that's out there. So yeah, guys, let me know what you think. I have an idea of what my next review is going to be. I have teased it a little bit on Pixel's Perspective. I may have outright said it, quite frankly. Dragon Quest XI is what I would like to review next. So sometime between now and the end of the year, I hope to have a review on that out. But until that time, go play Phantasy Star IV. It's so good, you guys. It's so good. Especially if you're a fan of like anime style artwork and pixel art, and combining the two, and it's so good. It's so good. Go play it, guys. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. You know the drill. And as always, keep on gaming.